Hello and welcome to the Connected World here at IBC 2013. With me today I have Duncan Potter, CMO with Seawell Networks. Hello Duncan, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So, Seawell Networks, tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
What Seawell Networks provides is an intelligent software layer that runs over an existing video delivery capability. So if you have a cached network, what some people might call a CDN, or a video delivery network based on sort of a cache-based system, what we do is the intelligent piece across that then provides you with a whole range of additional service capabilities. So things like session management, dynamic repackaging, basically the ability to go to any device, the ability to manage individual sessions, which from an operations standpoint is incredibly important. And we also do things like enable targeted advertising. So it's really a case of making the network much more efficient than it may have been in the past, and also providing a fairly dramatic ROI acceleration capability by bringing new revenue opportunities, things like targeted ads, and then things like blackout compliance as well, or alternate content compliance.
And are you agnostic of the type of CDN powering the systems, or is it your own CDN platform?
No, we'll tend to work with whatever CDN platform is out there, and there's a huge variety of systems that are out there right now. You've got the commercial manufacturers doing all kinds of things, but in many cases what we're also seeing is a general trend where a lot of people are moving towards an open source platform, reducing the cost of their base level delivery capability, so that what they can do is then invest in the sort of the intelligence and the additional capability on top of that.
As a company, do you wrap services around this offering? Is that geographic reach, or is it Europe or global?
No, it's global reach. I mean, the need for these kind of services is really everywhere. They may pop up in different areas in different ways. I mean, there's a big focus on targeted advertising in the US right now, and we're just seeing some of the biggest MSOs start to roll these things out. If you look over in Europe, there is a desire, but that targeted advertising desire is for much more selective, much more specific campaign capability. And obviously you've got different privacy rules, you've really got a different expectation from the consumer of the kind of ads that they're going to see and how they're going to be treated. And then if you start looking forward to the mobile networks and really the rise of wireless being mobile infrastructure being sort of the next real wave of connection, then clearly there's an enormous potential for delivering these kind of multi-screen
IBC is a very busy show. Have you had any announcements of new products or services during the show this year?
Yes, so about 6 months ago, we announced a capability with Connex and Verimatrix to do per-session encryption. And the reason that that's important in the multi-screen world is because what it allows the operator to do once they have per-session encryption in place, and that means an individually encrypted session going out to every single device, it allows them to start talking to their content providers about their security framework and the kind of security that they can then provide, which gives them an advantage in both pricing and also an advantage in the availability of content. This show, what we did is we supplemented that. We've been doing some work with Seawell, who's really one of the leaders in digital watermarking and forensic watermarking. And what we collaborated on is the ability to provide per-session watermarking. Now, I won't go into the sort of technical capabilities that we have there, but basically really what this means is if a content provider finds a piece of content kind of where it shouldn't be, what they can do is upload that to the Seawell portal, and instead of just saying, okay, well, this piece of content was delivered to this operator, we can now start to say, this piece of content was delivered to that device.
Right.
And it was this type of device, this is when it was done, this is how it was done, this is the IP address.
Those systems allow track and trace, but the complexities around either prosecuting or going after a device owner are far more complex. Is it a solution to a problem which is only stage one of a final fix?
I mean, that's a very good question. I think what we're trying to break down with this kind of capability is the impunity with which content is copied, and this feeling of being able to hide in the forest. Because if you have watermarking, especially, and all of the forensics associated with that, going at an operator level with potentially millions of subscribers, the chances of somebody being able to prove that it was actually me that did something, my lawyers are going to have huge fun with that one. What we're now able to do is to say, no, everybody who participates in this network really needs to understand that we can trace it to the device. Okay. And at that point, then what you've got is you've got something which, whether it results in more prosecutions, I have no idea, but certainly what it enables you to do is to put the put it out there. I think the other thing that's really important is if you look at something like HEVC and 4K and all of these, and much higher quality content being made available. The challenge with that is that the security needs to be, the level of security needs to rise with the capability of the video. And I certainly see that it's entirely possible that the content providers themselves are going to insist on per-session watermarking, per-session encryption, and all of these advanced security capabilities before they're actually going to allow this, allow this kind of content to be broadcast.
Well, we've had discussions with a number of broadcasts, especially in the sports arena, around watermarking technology, and it seems that broadcasters before thought it was impossible, so didn't even think about it. But now they realize it is possible. They're having those discussions. You must have met a lot of customers and prospects over the show. What have been the themes that you've seen coming through in discussions?
Well, obviously, some of them have seen the news, and obviously we've got a collaboration with Seawell. So, that's certainly been one area that has been very, very interesting. I think the other areas that we see, obviously, because we're playing primarily in the infrastructure space, is we're seeing a lot of operators starting to think about expanding outside their own, maybe national borders, and offering services outside. They're not looking to break their content capabilities, but many of them actually have their own content, or they generate their own content. They want to be able to provide that to a much broader market. And along with that, what they want to be able to do is to use tools like ours or software like ours to be able to make sure that they really do enforce the content rights properly. So if they don't have rights to a certain type of device or a certain geography or this kind of stuff, they need to be able to do that on a per content by content basis rather than on a sort of transmission basis. And that's something that we absolutely do allow is the ability to say, I can't play this content to that type of device, but I can play it to this type of device as long as it's in this geographic region. So I think the underlying infrastructure that we're seeing, especially for multi-screen delivery, is becoming much, much more sophisticated, and that's really where we focus our efforts.
It's almost as if the content and technology teams are finally speaking on a common language. Before there was a somewhat a disconnect between what we'd like to do and what was technically possible. I guess when you're not talking to customers and prospects at the stand, you're going around the show. Any highlights of technology that you've seen that have been very interesting or emerging of new standards? We had a Dash presentation which was very well attended here at our own theatre. Any areas or technology that you've thought, wow, we really need to start having those discussions?
Well, we're very heavily involved in Dash, for instance. We participate very heavily in the industry forum. And what we're looking at it from is the point of view of being able to repackage either way, so potentially using Dash as a mezzanine format, and then making sure that we deal with all the shall I say legacy formats, but that are still used effectively. We've certainly seen that. I think the whole HEVC and 4K conversations are very interesting. Not necessarily because they affect the technology that we deal with. Really, we're really somewhat agnostic to all of that. But I think what we're starting to see is the fundamental effect that then starts to have on the need for additional security, the additional watermarking, much higher, much sort of lower bandwidth, higher capability. transmission.
One person described HEVC as a reason to upgrade, not the upgrade itself. It enabled so many other things in the workflow that hadn't been thought about because they were on a checklist, but because they're now moving to HEVC as a de facto standard, it allowed a lot of other conversations to take place.
I think that's a very good observation. I mean, operators want to be ready for that. They can see the potential of it. You're talking about, higher quality, lower bandwidth, a much broader range of devices potentially, and that basically means that now what I've got to do is I've got to make absolutely sure that all of my security framework, my delivery framework, my repackaging capabilities, my backhaul costs can all be managed to be able to provide this type of content out to this huge range of devices that it enables.
So what does 2014 hold for you guys? Are there any things that you can give us some insight into what your areas you're looking at, technologies, partnerships?
Yes, certainly. From our point of view, I think that it really falls into sort of three things. Firstly, we will be announcing some new products, actually relatively shortly, that give us a good boost into 2014. Certainly in what we're seeing in the ad insertion space, there's a lot of excitement going on around there right now because we're finally starting to get all of the ecosystem together and it's working. And we'll start to see some very big deployments, I think, over the next year or so. The next piece is that obviously, a smaller organization like ours, partnerships are extremely important. You'll see us making some pretty significant partner announcements. And one of the things that's become very, very interesting over the last 4 or 5 years, actually even over the last 2 years, is this huge consolidation in the industry. You've got the Aris Motorola relationship. You've got Ericsson certainly stamping their authority on a large portion of the market. And of course, you've got Cisco. So, from that point of view, I think what we're starting to see is some really interesting consolidation there. And what that means is that you pick your partners, right? You have to make sure that whatever you're offering is very much in line with theirs. And so you'll see more of that from us. And then,
just as an aside, is that you're right, there have been some interesting mergers and acquisitions that are starting to create blocks. Is that a good thing for a company like yourself, who are technology innovators, having to make sure that your technology is going to be working with these blocks? Is it a good thing? Do you welcome those types of agreements?
Well, it is a very good thing. Because instead of trying to adjust what you're doing to every random ecosystem that might be put together by anybody who's out there, what it means is that there's very definitive philosophies that you tend to come across. The most important thing, though, is that what it does is it makes it a lot easier for a customer to get their head around this whole level of complexity. I mean, trying to put this stuff together yourself. There are companies that do it, and they do it very well. They tend to operate on the leading edge. But what that tends to do is it tends to leave everybody else just wondering which one's going to play out best. And now,
isn't there a danger, though, when that happens, that there's a delay in investment, where when we're going through a transitional phase of companies aligning to these groups, customers tend to not want to commit until the dust has settled? Like, are you seeing that, or are people prepared to take the risk? Well,
I think we've
made the investment.
It's a very good point. I think I think one of the things that we have seen is that we've seen, for instance, we've been talking about the potential for targeted ad insertion forever. Or it feels like forever, at least a year, maybe 2. The challenge that you have is that it's a very complex ecosystem, and there's some things in there that are really complex to do that at first blush you would think were fairly simple. I mean, the manifest manipulation components associated with ad insertion. If you're going off to Apple iOS devices, you do it in one way. If you're dealing with Android devices running the same format, you have to deal with things in a different way. And then you go to the other side of the world, which is smooth, and all bets are off at that point because it's a completely different environment. So once you get into that level of complexity, it's a lot of those problems that we're now starting to really solve and be able to scale. So getting back to the consolidation point, what that means is that there's more focus around an end-to-end solution rather than the customer having to do this themselves. And quite frankly, what that means is, in general, that's going to be good for the general market. Okay. It's still, to some extent, the early adopters are still going to do this by themselves. They're still going to show leadership. They're still going to, use this as a different way of differentiation.
And I guess this is the great place to kind of meet those early adopters and be there at the start of their journeys.
And that's absolutely right. And quite frankly, that's why we're here.
Perfect. Duncan Potter, thank you for your time today. So that's it from us here at the Connected World Studios at IBC 2013. Thank you.